In the sprawling suburbs of America, there's a dream. It's a dream of new construction, fresh paint, and clean streets. It's a perfect home on what's supposed to be untouched land, where a family can plant its roots and build a future. It's a dream of safety, community, and a life carved out of the raw, promising earth. But what happens when that earth isn't untouched? What if the ground beneath those manicured lawns holds a history that was deliberately forgotten, a story that was violently erased? What happens when breaking ground on your future means digging up a past that refuses to stay buried? For one family in Texas, their suburban dream became the foundation for a waking nightmare. They thought they were moving into a house, but they had unknowingly settled near what some locals claimed was a cemetery. This isn't just another ghost story told around a campfire. This story, which became famous after being featured on the show Unsolved Mysteries, tells of a haunting so profound and a local legend so potent that it terrified a neighborhood and became a chilling piece of paranormal history. It's the story of a house linked to the legend of the Black Hope Curse. For the Haney family, it was the American dream, until the day they broke ground in their own backyard. They thought they were building a future, a place for their kids to swim and play under the hot Texas sun. But what their backhoe reportedly unearthed was a nightmare that had been waiting for decades. According to the family story, they uncovered coffins and human remains, a secret the land itself had tried to keep. This isn't just a ghost story. It's the story of a house that, for a time, became a gateway to something terrifying. The Haneys claim they reburied the bodies, hoping to show respect. But instead of peace, they say they unleashed a torrent of paranormal activity so intense and personal that it would become the stuff of legend. This is the story of what can happen when the dead are disturbed, and they decide to fight back. The Dream of Newport. In the early 1980s, the future of Texas looked bright, and nowhere did it shine more brilliantly than in the suburbs ringing the metropolis of Houston. One such place was the Newport subdivision, a master-planned community near Crosby, Texas, that promised a new way of life. Newport was the embodiment of progress, a sprawling tapestry of winding roads, pristine cul-de-sacs, and brand-new homes. Advertisements painted a picture of idyllic family life, with community pools, tennis courts, and a golf course. It was a place to escape the city and embrace the quiet promise of the suburbs. This was the very promise that called to Sam and Judith Haney. Like so many others, they were looking for their own slice of the American dream. They wanted a safe place to raise their family, a home with a yard big enough for their children to run free. When they bought their house in the Newport subdivision, they believed they had found the perfect place to stay for a long time. From the moment they moved in, life was good. The house was filled with the sounds of a happy family. The Haneys quickly became part of the Newport community, making friends with their neighbors, who were all, like them, starting a new chapter. There was a shared sense of optimism in the air, a collective belief that they had all made the right choice. The Haney home was a hub of activity. The children loved their new surroundings, exploring the neighborhood on their bikes. Sam and Judith watched them play, their hearts full of the quiet satisfaction that comes from seeing a dream realized. Their house wasn't just wood and brick, it was the container for their future, a vessel for all their hopes. They planned birthday parties and holiday gatherings. One of their biggest dreams for the property was to install a swimming pool in the backyard. In the blistering heat of a Texas summer, a pool was the final piece of their perfect suburban puzzle. It would be a place for the family to gather, to cool off, and to host barbecues. They saved their money, and in 1983, the day finally came to break ground. As the heavy machinery rolled into their backyard, it felt like the culmination of everything they had worked for. But as the steel bucket of the backhoe bit into the soft Texas soil, it was not the future they were digging for. They were about to unearth a past so dark it would shatter their dream forever and drag them into a terrifying mystery that remains debated to this day. The discovery and the buried past. The roar of the engine filled the air as the backhoe operator began to carve out the shape of the future swimming pool. Then, a sudden jarring sound, the scrape of metal against something hard. The operator stopped, thinking he'd hit a large rock. He tried again. Same sound. Sam Haney walked over to get a better look. As the operator carefully scraped away the soil, a shape began to emerge. It was long, dark, and wooden, looking unnervingly like an old, rotting box. A chilling realization began to dawn. The operator turned to Sam, his face pale, and confirmed their worst fears. He had hit a coffin. Work stopped immediately. The authorities were called, and the Haney's backyard was no longer a construction site. The situation became even more shocking when a second coffin was found alongside the first. Inside one, 2 wedding rings were discovered on the frail finger bone of a skeleton. The discovery of these remains would peel back the layers of forgotten history hidden beneath the lawns of Newport. The search for answers led the Haneys to a longtime local resident named Jasper Norton. According to the story told on Unsolved Mysteries, Norton had worked as a gravedigger in his youth and told the Haneys that their home and others were built on an old African-American cemetery called Black Hope. He claimed the deceased were mainly former slaves, with as many as 60 people buried in unmarked graves, the last burial taking place in 1939. He even gave names to the remains found in the backyard: Betty and Charlie Thomas, who had passed away in the 1930s. This identification as 18, however, comes from local oral history, not from official forensic or historical documents. The land's history traces back to the period after the Civil War. Across Texas, formerly enslaved people founded hundreds of settlements known as freedom colonies. These were intentional communities where black families could own their own land, build their own societies, and create a life of independence and safety. Black Hope was said to be one of these communities. It had its own church, school, and, like any community, a place to honor its dead. Over the decades, as descendants moved away, the community dissolved and its stories faded. The cemetery, a sacred ground, was lost to time. It was never officially registered with the county, and eventually the land was sold to developers who saw only empty acreage. Faced with this tragic story, the Haneys decided to do what they felt was the most respectful thing. Some accounts say the developers paid to have the bodies moved, while the Haney story claims they chose to re-inter Betty and Charlie Thomas on the property, near their original resting place. They held a small ceremony, hoping their act of compassion would bring peace. They believed they were making things right. They could not have been more wrong. According to their story, this act of respect was misinterpreted. The spirits of the Black Hope Cemetery, they claimed, were not pacified. They were awakened. The haunting begins. The change wasn't immediate. It started subtly, with a series of small, unsettling events. It began with sounds, footsteps walking across the upstairs floor when everyone was downstairs, and soft whispers from empty corners. The Haneys, by all accounts rational people, tried to explain it away as the house settling or an overactive imagination. Then, personal items began to disappear and reappear in strange places. Keys left on a counter would vanish, only to show up inside a locked cabinet. It was perplexing, but still, they tried to find logical explanations. Soon, the activity escalated. The electrical systems in the house reportedly went haywire. Lights would flicker, and appliances would turn on and off by themselves. The most chilling incident involved a clock in their bedroom. The Haneys said they were awakened one night by a buzzing sound and a strange glow. To their horror, they discovered an unplugged clock on their dresser was sparking and emitting a pale, green light, its hands spinning wildly. The feeling of being watched became constant. Family members would catch fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures out of the corners of their eyes. The children started having nightmares, waking up screaming about a man or woman in their room. The joy that had once filled the house was curdling into a palpable dread. For Judith Haney, the experiences became deeply personal. She often felt cold spots in the house, even on the hottest days. One afternoon, while home alone, she heard a loud crash from the kitchen and rushed in to find every single cabinet door and drawer flung wide open. Sam Haney, a man grounded in logic, found his skepticism eroding. The turning point came one evening when an object suddenly flew off the fireplace mantel and shattered against the opposite wall, with no one near it. In that moment, the Haneys could no longer deny what they believed was the truth. They weren't alone in their home. Their act of acknowledging the graves hadn't brought peace. It had, in their minds, opened a door. The dream of Newport was dead, replaced by the terrifying reality of a house under siege. The curse spreads. The strange energy that the Haneys felt couldn't be contained within their walls. Like a sickness, the legend of the curse began to spread, infecting the idyllic suburban landscape of Newport. Families living near the Haneys began to report their own unsettling experiences. It started with the same things the Haneys had described: unexplained noises, objects moving, and that unshakable feeling of being watched. One neighbor reported hearing what sounded like a party in the Haneys' backyard in the middle of the night, only to look outside and see nothing but silent darkness. Another family, the Williamses, said coffin-shaped sinkholes would appear in their yard, and no matter how many times they filled them in, they would always return. The dream of Newport was fracturing. Cheerful greetings between neighbors were replaced with hushed, fearful conversations. People knew about the bodies the Haneys had found, and now they were connecting the dots between that grim discovery and the strange anxiety settling over their street. Then the story took a tragic turn. Some neighbors began to believe the curse could inflict more than just fear. According to Jean Williams, whose family also reported intense paranormal activity, her 30-year-old daughter Tina, who lived across the street, was a healthy, vibrant woman. One day, while helping her mother dig in the yard in a desperate search for more evidence of the cemetery, Tina suffered a massive, fatal heart attack. To the terrified residents, her sudden death was no coincidence. They saw it as a direct consequence of the curse, a horrifying sign that whatever was haunting their neighborhood could cause real harm. Faced with mounting fear, a group of residents, including the Haneys, banded together and filed a lawsuit against the developer. Their claim was simple. The developer knew or should have known about the Black Hope Cemetery and failed to disclose it. They had been sold homes on desecrated graves and believed they were now paying a spiritual price. They presented their stories and the historical accounts of the Black Hope community. The case, however, was ultimately lost. Because the Black Hope Cemetery had been wiped from official records, there was no legal proof that a full cemetery had ever existed on that land. The discovery of 2 graves was dismissed in court as an isolated burial, not evidence of a larger graveyard. A jury initially awarded the Haneys $142,000, but a judge reversed the decision on legal grounds, ruling the developers were not liable and ordering the Haneys to pay $50,000 in court costs. The failed lawsuit was a devastating blow. The families felt utterly helpless, trapped in homes they could no longer live in, on land they now believed was haunted. The darkness in Newport was deepening, and for the Haney family the walls were closing in. Mid-roll CTA. The terror was no longer just inside their walls. It was consuming their neighborhood, and the law had turned its back on them. The Haneys and their neighbors were alone. If you find stories like this, where history and horror collide, as compelling as we do, take a second to hit that subscribe button. You are not going to want to miss what happened next, as the family sought a different kind of help. Section 5. The Unsolved Mystery. Defeated in court, the Haney family turned toward the realm of the supernatural for answers. Their home had become a place of constant fear. Their plight eventually attracted the attention of the media, and their case was famously documented on the television show Unsolved Mysteries. This brought a new level of scrutiny, and, for a time, a glimmer of hope. As part of the show, paranormal researchers and psychics were brought to the house. Their findings only validated the family's terrifying experiences. Investigators recorded unexplained electromagnetic field fluctuations and captured audio with disembodied voices, what researchers call electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs. Psychics who walked the property reported feeling an overwhelming sense of anger and injustice, claiming the spirits were not angry at the Haneys personally, but at the profound disrespect shown to their final resting place. One medium offered a particularly chilling theory. She claimed the Haneys' well-intentioned act of reburying the bodies had, in the spiritual realm, made them the new caretakers of the cemetery. This, she believed, had tied the family to the land and the spirits within it. The paranormal activity was their tortured, terrifying language. Despite the investigations and attempts to cleanse the home, the haunting, according to the family, did not stop. The Haney family was breaking under the strain. The constant fear and lack of sleep took a heavy toll on their health and their marriage. The house was no longer a home. It was a battleground they were losing. They came to a heartbreaking conclusion: they couldn't win. With their spirits broken, the Haney family made the only choice they had left. They filed for bankruptcy, abandoned their home, and fled, leaving behind the house they had built with so much hope. And then, a strange silence reportedly fell over the property. After the Haneys and other affected families like the Williamses left, the paranormal activity in the neighborhood allegedly ceased. The story goes that new residents who moved in, unaware of the land's dark history, reported no strange occurrences. This is perhaps the most profound part of the Black Hope Curse legend. The hauntings seem to be personal, tied to the families who were there during the initial disturbance. When they left, the spirits fell silent. Today, the house still stands, and the Newport subdivision thrives. So, what happened? Was the curse fulfilled once it drove the families away? Or are the spirits simply dormant, lying in wait? The mystery remains unsolved. There are no definitive answers, only lingering, terrifying questions. The house is quiet now, but the history is not gone. The legend of the Black Hope community and its cemetery is a scar on the land, a testament to a past that refuses to be forgotten. The silence on that street in Newport, Texas, may not be a sign of peace. It might just be the quiet of something waiting for the next person to, once again, break ground. The story of the Haney family and the Black Hope Curse is a chilling cautionary tale about a family who bought into the promise of a perfect future, only to have it destroyed by a past they never knew existed. Their journey began with hope and ended with them fleeing in terror from a house that had become a prison. Their dream was shattered by the discovery of 2 coffins, but the true horror of the legend lies in what those coffins represented: a history of injustice and a community of souls that refused to be silenced. The events in Newport, Texas, remain one of the most unsettling paranormal stories in American history, largely because of its clear historical roots in a forgotten African-American cemetery paved over in the name of progress. The subsequent legal battle highlighted a tragic reality. The law failed to recognize a history that wasn't written on an official map, leaving the victims, both living and, some would say, dead, without resolution.
The alleged haunting ceased when the families left, but this quiet ending offers no comfort. It only deepens the mystery. So we are left with the ultimate question. Was the ordeal in Newport a case of mass hysteria, a psychological firestorm ignited by the grim discovery of human remains? Or did the Haney family truly awaken something vengeful from the Black Hope Cemetery, a curse born from decades of neglect? The land remembers, even when people choose to forget. And some mysteries, it seems, are never meant to be solved. They simply remain a terrifying stain on the places we call home. What do you believe happened in that house in Newport, Texas? Was it a true paranormal curse, or something else entirely? Share your theories in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the world's most terrifying unsolved mysteries, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Click here to watch our next investigation into another of America's most haunted and cursed locations. You won't want to miss it. The promise you can't understand the nightmare this place became without first knowing the dream it was built on. At the turn of the 20th century, New York City was a place of brutal extremes. Incredible wealth existed right next to crushing poverty. For anyone who fell through the cracks, the poor, the sick, the elderly, the city's solution was usually to hide them in grim, overcrowded almshouses. But in 1898, a radical new idea took root on Staten Island. They called it the New York City Farm Colony. The plan was revolutionary. A self-sustaining community where people wouldn't just get a handout. They would contribute. They would work the land, tend to animals, and live with dignity. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a place for a fresh start. And for decades, it worked. The colony grew to cover almost 100 acres, a small village of handsome buildings surrounded by fields. At its peak in the 1940s, nearly 2,000 people lived there. They grew their own food, raised their own animals, and for a while, it seemed like a small-scale utopia, a real refuge for societies forgotten. The buildings themselves reflected this dream. These weren't scary, institutional fortresses. The dorms had wide porches, and the dining halls looked like country inns. Everything was designed to feel like a community. Old photos show men working in huge vegetable fields and women sewing in sunlit rooms. It looked more like a rural college campus than a poorhouse. This was a place where people were meant to be seen and cared for. But institutions are fragile. As the decades passed, the dream that built the farm colony began to die. Social Security and other welfare programs meant fewer people needed a place like this. The population got smaller and older, and it slowly turned into a home for the elderly with nowhere left to go. The fields lay empty, the halls grew quiet. In 1975, the last residents were moved next door to the Sea View Hospital, and the gates of the farm colony were locked for good. The sanctuary was officially a ghost town. The shadow, when a place built for 2,000 people goes silent, it leaves a hole. The abandoned farm colony became a sprawling, 46-acre ruin. Nature and vandals took over. The proud buildings, now with shattered windows and peeling paint, became monuments to a dead dream. The grounds became an overgrown, wild forest. And in this decay, the colony's second, much darker life began. The woods around the farm colony always had their stories. Back in the 1920s, a local legend started, a boogeyman to scare kids into coming home before dark. They called him Cropsy. As the story went, Cropsy was an escaped mental patient with an axe or a hook for a hand, who stalked the woods hunting for lost children. It was a classic campfire tale. But on Staten Island, the legend had a nasty habit of becoming real. In the 1970s and 80s, as the colony rotted, the Cropsy legend took on a terrifying new life. Children in the neighborhoods around the abandoned grounds started to actually disappear. The ghost stories were now headlines. The overgrown woods and crumbling buildings of the farm colony and the infamous Willowbrook State School next door were the perfect place for a predator to make a child vanish. The area became a real-life house of horrors, a place parents warned their kids about not because of a myth, but because of a monster. The fear wasn't just about one man. The abandoned grounds attracted all kinds of dark activity. Rumors spread about satanic cults holding rituals in the basements of the derelict buildings. Graffiti of pentagrams covered the walls, fueling theories that the disappearances were part of some organized evil. The public imagination transformed the site from a ruin into a place of true malevolence. Was there a single killer, a real-life Cropsy, hiding in the ruins? Or was something bigger going on? For years, the disappearances haunted the community. The farm colony was no longer a symbol of hope. It was a wound in the heart of the borough, a place where the line between a scary story and a real-life nightmare had completely vanished. And the monster at the center of it all was far more real than any legend. His name was Andre Rand. The monster, to understand the fear Andre Rand created, you have to look at the place that shaped him, the Willowbrook State School. Located right next to the farm colony, Willowbrook was a state-run institution for children with developmental disabilities. In 1972, a young Geraldo Rivera exposed the horrors inside: filth, overcrowding, and the systematic abuse of residents. It was a human rights catastrophe. and from 1966 to 1968, a man named Andre Rand, born Frank Russian, worked there as a custodian. Rand was a drifter who always seemed to exist on the edges of society, drawn to the vulnerable. After Willowbrook was shut down, he didn't go far. He haunted the abandoned grounds of both Willowbrook and the farm colony, setting up makeshift campsites deep in the overgrown woods. Some say he even lived in a labyrinth of steam tunnels beneath the dead campus. He knew this decaying world better than anyone. It was his kingdom and his hunting ground. The disappearances started to form a sickening pattern. In July 1972, just after Rand was paroled for a sex offense, 5-year-old Alice Pereira vanished from her apartment building's lobby, where Rand was working as a painter. She was never seen again. More children disappeared over the next decade. In 1981, it was 7-year-old Holly and Hughes. Her mother sent her to the store for a bar of soap. She bought it, but never came home. Witnesses later said they saw a man matching Rand's description circling the area in his green Volkswagen. Still, years passed with no arrest. In August 1983, just 12 days after Rand's release from a short jail sentence, 11-year-old Tyahese Jackson disappeared. Rand had a campsite less than half a mile away. Again, he was questioned, but nothing happened. The community was gripped by panic. Parents were terrified. A real-life boogeyman was taking their children, but police seemed unable to stop him. The breaking point finally came in the summer of 1987. On July 9th, a 12-year-old girl named Jennifer Schweiger, who had Down syndrome, went for a short walk and disappeared. Witnesses saw her walking hand-in-hand with a tall, disheveled man, Andre Rand. A massive search began, with hundreds of volunteers combing the woods of the farm colony in Willowbrook. For 35 agonizing days, they searched. The search ended with the discovery of a shallow grave on the Willowbrook grounds, not far from one of Rand's campsites. Inside, they found Jennifer's body. The community's worst fears were real. They had found their monster. In 1988, Rand was convicted of first-degree kidnapping, but the jury deadlocked on the murder charge. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. Justice felt incomplete, but investigators weren't done. Years later, they reopened the cold case of Holly and Hughes. Because there's no statute of limitations for first-degree kidnapping, they built a new case. In 2004, Rand was tried again. This time, former inmates testified that Rand had bragged about his crimes, even comparing himself to Ted Bundy. A jury found him guilty of kidnapping Holly and Hughes. He received another 25 years to life sentence, ensuring he would likely die in prison. He won't be eligible for parole until 2037, when he is 93 years old, but so many questions are still unanswered. The bodies of Holly and Hughes, Alice Pereira, and Tyahese Jackson have never been found. Other suspected victims, like Hank Gaforio and Audrey Lynn Nierenberg, also vanished without a trace. Andre Rand, the Pied Piper of Staten Island, took his darkest secrets with him to his cell. He is the chilling proof that sometimes the boogeyman is real. The ruins today, what's left of a New York City farm colony, is a skeleton. Walking the grounds is like stepping into another world. The grand old buildings are collapsing, their roofs caved in, their walls a canvas of graffiti. Nature is taking back the land, with trees growing through the floors and vines pulling the walls apart. Brick by brick, each crumbling building is a silent witness. In the cavernous dining hall, you can almost feel the weight of what happened here. This is where thousands once shared meals, now a hollowed-out chamber echoing with dripping water and the scuttling of unseen things. It's in a dark corner like this, maybe in the tunnels that snake beneath the property, that Andre Rand might have hidden, dragging his victims into a nightmare they'd never escape. The air here feels thick with sorrow and dread. The rumors of satanic rituals don't seem so crazy when you're standing in a basement littered with the remains of old fires and unsettling symbols on the walls. Whether it was real or just kids trying to scare each other, it adds to the feeling of a place desecrated by evil. The site is trapped in limbo. Despite being a historic landmark, preservation efforts have stalled for years. Recent plans to redevelop the area into a senior living community called Landmark Colony have been approved but faced numerous delays, leaving the ruins to continue their decay. Some see it as a chance to finally bring life back to this place of death. Others worry it will just pave over a history that should never be forgotten. For now, the ruins remain, a crime scene, a graveyard, and a powerful symbol of a dark chapter in New York's history. The story of the Staten Island farm colony is a terrifying reminder of how easily a place of refuge can become a place of fear. It's a story of decay, not just of buildings, but of the institutions meant to protect us. A place designed to care for the vulnerable was abandoned, and that neglect created the perfect hunting ground for a predator. Andre Rand is in prison, but the story isn't over. The bodies of so many of his suspected victims are still missing, their families trapped in a nightmare of not knowing. The legend of Cropsey became real because a community's fear was given a name and a face. But the questions left behind in the ruins aren't just about one man. What about the other children? Are there more victims, more secrets buried beneath the dirt? The House of Vanishings holds its secrets close. The wind that blows through its broken windows sounds like whispers, and in the shadows of its collapsing halls, the past is never really gone. It just waits. What do you think happened to the other missing children? Share your theories in the comments. And for more explorations into dark histories and unsolved mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we investigate next.